Well, good evening, everybody, and it's good to have you with us for this recording of the Ecclesiastical Law Society Bitesize session on the electoral roll. I have with me the renowned Russell Dewhurst, who has a role as communications in the Ecclesiastical Law Society. And this evening, as I say, we're going to ask him about the electoral roll. We'll be talking probably for about 15 minutes and then we'll end the recording, and then those who are here on the Zoom can ask questions. So, Russell, what is the electoral roll?
Well, good evening, Moira. Well, the electoral roll, I suppose, exists as part of synodical government in the church. In other words, it's the real basic level of how the Church of England is governed, or more prosaically, it's the nearest thing the Church of England has to a membership list. The Church of England has a fairly nebulous concept when it comes to membership. It's not very precise, sort of fuzzy edges, but when it comes to who's on the electoral roll, there are very formal rules. And that's for a number of reasons, but one of which is you really got to know who is going to be able to vote at an annual parochial church meeting, the annual meeting in the parish, who has got the right to attend and to vote. And that is basically, with a few others, the people whose names are on that parish's electoral roll.
And not everybody's going to be looking at this or listening to this, so there must be a way in which you can find out all about electoral rolls and APCM. So how will people do that?
Absolutely. Well, if you want to know the details, because obviously in a recording like this, we're not going to go into all the fine details. The place to look is the church representation rules, and you can buy a printed copy. But if you want to make sure you're up to date, the best thing to do is to go online, the Church of England website, or just Google church representation rules, and you find them there. But there's a very friendly, user-friendly presentation on the parish resources website. So I'll put in the chat when I finish speaking, and on the YouTube, links to the parish resources website and their page about the electoral roll. That's the top place for finding out more, I think.
So, to give people a bit of an idea, who can be on the electoral roll?
Well, to be on the electoral roll, you've got to be baptized, first of all, no exception to that, and you've got to be at least 16 years old. And also, you can't be ordained. So you and I, Moira, can never be on an electoral roll, I'm afraid. And then each parish has so the electoral rolls I've already implied belongs to a certain parish, and anybody wanting to join the electoral roll who falls into the category I've already described has to make one of three declarations. The first of which is if they're resident in the parish. So a parish always has a geographic boundary. And if you live in that geographic boundary and you're willing to declare that you're a member of the Church of England, you can sign that first declaration. So a member of the Church of England and you live in the parish. I should say as well, it's you can also, instead of being a member of the Church of England, you might be a member of another church in full communion with the Church of England. That includes other Anglican churches and certain other churches, mainly overseas. So that's the first declaration. That's if you live in the parish. And then the other two are for people who, primarily for people who don't live in the parish boundary. So the second declaration, you say that you're a member of the Church of England or another church in communion, and you say in the past 6 months, I've habitually attended worship in the parish. So that's for people who they worship regularly in a church. It's not where they live, and they're joining the electoral. They make that statement. And if you can't habitually attend worship for a good reason, perhaps you're sick or housebound, then you can say, I would have habitually attended worship, except that. And that's the second declaration. And then the third declaration is for people who, I suppose, their primary identification as a Christian is with another Trinitarian church, not one that's in full communion with the Church of England. So they might be a Methodist, Baptist, and so on. But they're also willing to say, I am also a member of the Church of England, and they habitually attend worship or would have attended worship like the second declaration. So it's one of those three, all of which you have to say I'm a member of the Church of England or a church or of a church in communion with it. But there are those other sort of criteria as well. So one way or another, if you sign one of those, you and fulfill the other criteria, you can join the electoral roll.
So you don't have to be confirmed to be a member of the Church of England.
No, that's right. Saying I'm a member doesn't mean I'm confirmed or even a communicant. So generally speaking, to be on the parochial church council, you have, or any area of synodical government holding an office, you have to be a communicant. There are a few exceptions, but to be able to go on the electoral roll, to vote, to play that level of membership, you need to be baptized, but not necessarily confirmed or a communicant.
So you can think of yourself as a Baptist and a member of the Church of England, like I
Yep.
did for some years before, obviously, I was confirmed and now I'm ordained. But why be on an electoral roll?
Well, the primary reason, as I said at the beginning, is that this is part of the church's governance. And if you're on that electoral roll, you've got then the right to attend the annual meeting and any extraordinary meetings, if there are any, in the life of your parish, to vote, elect people, and so on. And then there are also some other reasons you might want to be on the electoral roll, especially if you don't live in the parish, because there is a certain rights that parishioners have, people who live in the parish, which are also extended to people outside the parish if they're on the electoral roll, including rights to marriage and burial rights as well. So, and the right for the priest can come and minister to you when you're sick without needing permission from the priest of the parish where you live and things like that. So all sorts of reasons, really. If you're a regular part of the life of that church, you are likely to want to go on the electoral roll.
So who then has this electoral roll? Who looks after it?
Well, it's the PCC, the Parochial Church Council, who's responsible for the electoral roll, and the PCC has to appoint someone as the electoral roll officer. That might be the PCC secretary, it might be somebody else. And that electoral roll officer maintains the electoral roll. They're likely to do that in a spreadsheet or something like that on their computer, but they do it under the direction of the PCC. And the version that the electoral roll officer has will include all the information that they collect in the form that we'll see in a minute, including someone's address, their name and address, make sure they do live in the parish if that's what they've said, and that they can be communicated with. But now this is really important, and I do often see this not being followed round and about the place. That the PCC also has to make a version of the electoral roll publicly available to anybody who's got a good reason to inspect it. So you can go along to the PCC and say, I'd like to see the electoral roll, please. But that version that you see should only have the names. And similarly, when the roll is published before the annual meeting each year and pinned up in church, that version again should only have the names for data protection reason. That version that other people see should not have everyone's address. And a couple of other responsibilities the electoral roll officer has, as well as keeping the roll up to date, is to report, or the PCC anyway, has the responsibility to report to the annual meeting on changes to the electoral roll each year, and also has the responsibility to report to the secretary of the diocesan synod each year as well, so that the numbers of those higher levels of church governance can be sort of kept up to date.
Because there's differences in how many members you can elect to the deanery synod according to how many are on your electoral roll.
Exactly, that's right. A different number of deanery synod reps in future years if your electoral roll number goes above or below the various thresholds.
So that sounds like something's happening once a year. But what if I move into the parish partway through the year?
Well, you can be added to an electoral roll almost at any time. There is a time when the electoral roll's just been revised or redone and it's frozen for a couple of weeks. But generally speaking, if you move into the parish or you start worshipping regularly after a period of 6 months, you can then be added. You ask the electoral roll officer, I'd like to be added to the electoral roll. Now, one change in the recent big changes to how all this works is that you're not removed at any time during the year. People are only removed from electoral rolls now when the roll is revised or renewed that once a year. And that will be the time. So I'll come to in a minute. This is a special year coming up where the electoral roll won't be revised, but normally, not in 2025, in other years, the electoral roll officer would, at that time of revision, remove people who no longer qualify for one reason or another.
And what sort of reasons would people stop qualifying?
Well, they might be ordained more, then they no longer qualify. They might sadly die, move away, stop coming to church. But if they stop coming to church because, for example, they've been unwell, they have a similar reason like that, and they say, I would have continued coming to church if I could, then they must remain, if they want to, that is. The electoral roll officer doesn't have the discretion to kick them off. That's what I'm saying. Then they have the right to remain on the electoral roll.
But you said that this is a special year, the 2025.
Indeed, every 6 years, the electoral roll isn't revised. So I'm not really going to talk about revising the electoral roll because I think it'd be a bit confusing. In this coming year, 2025, it's the 1 year in 6 when the electoral roll finished, comes to an end. It's not revised anymore. It's archived away or thrown out, whatever. And a new electoral roll is prepared, as it were, from scratch. So that's what every parish in the Church of England is going to have to do in the coming year. So I thought to sort of finish off my remarks more, it might be useful if I give the real basics of how the electoral roll officer and the PCC will need to do this in the coming months, the beginning of 2025. Would that be?
I think that would be helpful to people. Thank you.
And as I say, for those who are actually going to do this, hopefully this is a good introduction, but do have a look at those resources I mentioned and in the links. So the first thing that the parish needs to do is decide on the date for the APCM, the annual parochial church meeting. That must be by the 31st of May. And usually people want it quite late because things like the accounts and the reports have to be prepared. But you need that date because you need to count back from that date, because there's going to be a notice that you need to put up to advertise that we need a new electoral roll, and then the electoral roll needs to be put together, and then that needs to be on display for 14 days. So you basically need to go back and start all this at least a month. You probably want to say at least 6 weeks before the APCM. And so, as I say, the first thing that's going to happen is the minister or the PCC vice chair is going to put up a notice. And this has got to now be, sorry, I said 6 weeks, at least 2 months it's got to be before the APCM on or near the main door of the church. So at least 2 months. Once you've got that date, count back 2 months. And here we are. It's notice. Looks like this. You can get it from the Parish Resources website. Notice of preparation of a new electoral roll to let everybody know that this is going to happen. That's got to be up for at least 14 days. And while that notice is up, at every Sunday service, the person leading the service has to draw people's attention to the fact that a new electoral roll is being drawn up. And if you're in a church that doesn't have a service during that time, at the next Sunday service, it has to be announced. And the PCC also has to inform everyone who was on the old roll about the revision, as far as is reasonably possible. So if you've got their email addresses, email them and so forth, and make sure that people realize they've got to be on this new electoral roll. So and of course, parishes will want to advertise in parish magazines and on websites as well. And then everybody who's seen these notices and heard about the new roll has to complete a form. So they can't just say, oh, I'm staying on from last time. Everyone has to fill in a new form. So it's the standard form application for enrolment on the church electoral roll. I mentioned earlier, you tick the boxes, fill in the information. It's on the Parish Resources website. There are often versions on diocesan websites as well. So that form's got to be filled in. And then between 15 and 28 days before the APCM, the roll has to be completed. So that's when the electoral officer will say, we're going to just pause. We can't take any new names now for a couple of weeks. And then that new roll has to be published. It means it has to be put up, made available, published in church, available for inspection. So people can check that their form got through. They really are there on the electoral roll, and so forth. As I say, not with addresses, the version for inspection. And during that 14 days, any errors can be corrected, but no new names can be added. And once that 14 days is over, any corrections made if needed, that is then the new electoral roll, and you're ready for the annual parochial church meeting. And if necessary, should there be any close votes and that sort of thing, you can check that who is on that electoral roll for voting, and make the various reports to the APCM and to the Diocesan Synod. So that in summary is how you put it together.
Thank you for that, Russell. We'll now switch off the recording and we can have questions from those who are here in person.